They said she was too old for love, too worn by years of drought and grief and quiet sacrifices to be chosen by any man who still believed he had a future. And they said it loudly in the open square as if shame were a rope they could loop around her shoulders and pull tight. But when Elias Granger lifted her into his arms in front of them all, something in the town cracked like dry earth after rain, because Mara Whitlow had not been lifted by anyone in years, not since her husband was buried on the hill and her sons scattered by hunger and war. And now here she was, 60 winters etched into her hands and face, dust on her skirt, fear steady in her chest, looking into the eyes of a man who had come back from the range with a limp, a scar that pulled his mouth into a permanent half-frown, and a ranch broken by debt and fire, a man the town called ruined and dangerous, and yet he held her as if she weighed nothing, as if her age were not a verdict but a story he wanted to read from the first page again. The crowd's fingers pointed like rifles, men muttering that she was past her time, women whispering that it wasn't decent, that she should know better, that he would regret it. But Mara heard none of it clearly, because the sound of her own heart was louder, pounding with the memory of all the times she had been overlooked, passed by, chosen last, and she remembered the day the schoolteacher stopped inviting her to socials, the day the shopkeeper started calling her ma'am with pity instead of respect, the day she realized mirrors had become places of quiet negotiations rather than hope. Elias looked at her not with hunger or charity, but with recognition, as if he had been waiting for a face like hers to tell him the truth about surviving. And when he spoke, his voice carried across the square like a promise spoken once and meant forever, telling them she was perfect for him, not despite the years, but because of them. Because she knew how to stay when things burned, how to plant again after loss, how to listen when the night brought old ghosts to the door. The sheriff tried to intervene, citing propriety and peace, but Elias did not lower her, did not argue, did not beg. He simply stood there, steady as a fence post hammered into stubborn ground, and the town felt the uncomfortable weight of a man who had already lost everything, and therefore could not be threatened. Mara's hands clutched his jacket, worn leather cracked at the elbows, and she felt the tremor in his arms, not weakness, but restraint, the careful strength of someone afraid, of breaking what he holds dear, and she realized that for the first time in years, someone was being careful with her. Her mind wandered back through the long corridor of her life, to the mornings she rose before light to bake bread for men who barely looked up, to the nights she counted coins and prayed the roof would hold, to the funerals where she learned how to cry without sound, and she understood then that age had not emptied her. It had filled her with a quiet resilience that no young thing could imitate. Elias had seen that when he first came to her door weeks earlier, asking for help mending a fence he could no longer fix alone, had seen it when she worked beside him without complaint, when she spoke plainly and did not flinch at his scars, when she laughed once, unexpectedly, at a joke he thought had died in his throat, and something in him had eased, like a knot loosened after years of being pulled too tight. The town had noticed the way he looked at her and decided it was wrong because it did not fit their rules, because it challenged their fear of time and their belief that worth expired, and so they gathered now, pointing and judging, hoping to push them back into their separate, acceptable lonelinesses. But Elias did not set her down, and Mara did not ask him to, and in that stillness the air shifted, because courage has a way of making noise without sound. She lifted her chin. Then, meeting the crowd's eyes, and spoke with a calm that surprised even herself, saying she had been old since she was young, old with responsibility and loss, and if this was the age that finally allowed her to choose joy, then she would not apologize for it. Elias smiled, just barely. The scar tugging, and the town saw not scandal, but a man and a woman choosing each other against the smallness of expectation. The sun slid behind the wooden facades, throwing long shadows that made everyone look older, and perhaps that was the point, that time would claim them all eventually, and only love, in whatever unlikely shape it arrived, would argue back. As Elias carried Mara through the parting crowd toward the road that led out of town and back to the broken ranch, waiting to be rebuilt, whispers followed them, some sharp, some uncertain, and a few, quietly, sounded like hope, because seeing someone choose a future when the world insists there isn't one can unsettle even the most stubborn hearts. And Mara, feeling the steady rhythm of his steps, knew that whatever waited ahead, hard work, judgment, nights, when the past returned, it would be faced together, not as a mistake, but as a declaration that she was not too old for love, and he was not too broken to give it. The road to Elias Granger's ranch was long and uneven, cut through dry fields and burned fence lines, and with every step he took carrying Mara away from the town that had tried to shame them, the future grew heavier and clearer at the same time. Because love chosen late in life does not come with illusions, it comes with truth, and both of them knew the work waiting ahead would be hard, unforgiving, and public, yet neither asked the other to turn back. When they reached the ranch, the place looked as broken as the man who owned it. Charred beams from the fire that had taken the main barn, cattle numbers reduced to shadows of ledgers, debt notes folded and refolded in Elias's pocket. But Mara did not see ruin. She saw possibility, the same way she had once seen life in an empty house after her husband's death, and she set herself down from his arms and began, without ceremony, to sweep the porch, because healing often starts with small, stubborn acts. Word traveled fast, as it always does, and neighbors came not with smiles, but with curiosity sharpened into judgment, waiting to see the mistake collapse, waiting for the old woman to tire and the broken rancher to regret his defiance. Yet days turned into weeks, and something unexpected happened. The ranch began to breathe again. Mara woke before dawn, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, baking, mending, planning, her hands remembering purpose, while Elias worked the land with a renewed steadiness, his limp still there but no longer the loudest thing about him, because every time pain pulled at his leg, he remembered the weight of her trust and kept moving. At night, they sat together in quiet, not filling the air with promises they couldn't guarantee, but sharing stories, grief laid gently between them like a map already traveled. And in that honesty they found rest. The town sent its tests soon enough, creditors refusing terms, suppliers raising prices, whispers that she was using him, that he was desperate. But Mara had lived long enough to know that survival is not about proving others wrong. It's about not letting their voices drown your own. And she stood beside Elias when he renegotiated, when he failed, when he tried again, her presence a calm reminder that worth does not decrease because the world says it should. Slowly, subtly, change crept in. A neighbor left extra feed, without a word. A young boy came asking to learn fence repair from the man who didn't quit. A woman from town brought seeds and said she admired Mara's courage, but hadn't known how to say it before. Elias noticed how people listened when Mara spoke, how her age carried authority rather than weakness, and he realized that what he loved was not just her kindness, but her endurance. The way she could stand in the middle of difficulty and make it feel survivable. One evening, as the sun set red over land that finally showed signs of recovery, Elias took Mara's hands and admitted his fear, not of her leaving, but of failing her, of not being enough after all she had endured. And Mara answered with the simple truth that she had not chosen him for safety or ease, but for honesty, for the way he said stay without demanding, and that for the first time since her youth, she felt seen not as a role, but as a person. When the town eventually gathered again, this time not to accuse but to witness, Elias did not carry Mara, and she did not need him to, because they stood side by side, equal and unashamed. And when someone muttered that love like theirs was rare, Elias answered that it was only rare because people were taught to fear time instead of respecting it. The ranch survived, not because miracles arrived, but because two people refused to let labels decide their ending, and Mara, once dismissed as too old, became the quiet center of a life rebuilt, while Elias, once written off as broken, learned that strength is not the absence of damage, but the courage to keep choosing connection. And so their story closed not with a dramatic victory, but with something far more powerful: a shared mourning, steady work, laughter returning in small, surprising ways, and a truth worth remembering. It is never too late to be chosen, and never too late to choose back. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you that love and purpose don't expire with age, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.